Barron Trump poses as a poor man at a fancy restaurant. The waiter's cruelty costs him everything. The evening air was crisp as Barron Trump stepped out of a taxi in front of Le Maison Royale, one of the most exclusive restaurants in the city. The kind of place where only the elite dined, where a single meal cost more than what most people earned in a month. But tonight, Barron wasn't arriving in his usual sleek black SUV with security detail. Tonight, he wasn't Barron Trump, the billionaire's son. Tonight, he was just a poor man in ragged clothes. His dark hoodie was torn at the sleeve, his jeans frayed at the edges, and his once-clean sneakers were scuffed and dirty. His normally perfectly styled hair was deliberately tousled, and he had even smeared a bit of dirt on his face to complete the disguise. He took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the moment. He had spent his entire life in luxury, surrounded by wealth, but tonight was different. Tonight, he wanted to see the world from the other side. He wanted to experience how the less fortunate were treated in places where money ruled all. Would kindness still exist in a place like this? Or would he be cast aside, discarded, just because of how he looked? He pulled the restaurant door open and stepped inside. Instantly he felt it, the stares. The soft hum of conversation faltered as heads turned toward him. Men in crisp designer suits and women in glittering gowns wrinkled their noses in disgust. Waiters exchanged uneasy glances. And then came the voice. A sharp, condescending tone cut through the air like a knife. "Sir, I believe you're in the wrong place." Barron turned his head toward the source. A tall waiter with slicked back hair and a sneer stretched across his face stood by the podium, his posture rigid, his eyes filled with judgment. Barron took a step forward. "I'd like a table, please." The waiter let out a short, humorless laugh. Some of the nearby guests chuckled too. "A table?" The waiter's gaze swept over Barron's tattered clothes. "Do you even know where you are?" Barron tilted his head slightly, playing along. "Yes. Le Maison Royale. I was hoping to enjoy a meal here tonight." The waiter crossed his arms. "This restaurant has a strict dress code. We don't serve people who," he waved a hand dismissively at Barron's outfit, "clearly can't afford to be here." A few of the nearby customers smirked. A wealthy couple whispered to each other, their eyes gleaming with amusement. Barron's jaw tightened, but he forced himself to remain calm. "What if I can pay?" he asked, his voice even. The waiter scoffed. "Oh really? And what exactly would you be paying with?" Barron reached into his pocket and pulled out a worn leather wallet. He flipped it open, revealing a few crumpled bills and some coins. The waiter's smirk widened into outright laughter. "That wouldn't even cover a glass of water here," he said, shaking his head. "Listen, kid, why don't you try the diner down the street? I'm sure they'll have something more in your price range." Laughter rippled through the restaurant. Some guests looked away, embarrassed, but none spoke up. Barron felt his stomach churn. This was exactly what he had feared. People didn't care who you were on the inside. They only saw what you looked like. And if you looked poor, you were nothing. But he wasn't done yet. Barron felt the heat of humiliation creeping up his neck, but he refused to let it show. He wasn't leaving. Not yet. Not without seeing how far this cruelty would go. He squared his shoulders, his voice calm. "I don't understand. Are you refusing to serve me just because of how I look?" The waiter scoffed, rolling his eyes. More guests turned to watch, enjoying the spectacle. "I'm refusing to serve you because this is a fine dining establishment," the waiter said, emphasizing each word like he was speaking to a child. "And we don't cater to people who," he sneered, his voice dripping with mock sympathy, "look like they'd be better off at a soup kitchen." A few of the wealthier guests chuckled softly, clearly entertained by the unfolding drama. A woman in an expensive black gown leaned toward her dinner partner. "Can you imagine? Thinking he could afford this place?" Barron's fingers clenched into fists. It wasn't about the meal anymore. It was about the principle. "I don't believe that's how a restaurant is supposed to treat a customer," he said, his voice measured but firm. The waiter's smirk widened. "Oh really? And who exactly do you think you are, huh? Some kind of secret millionaire?" More laughter. The room buzzed with murmured conversations, the tension thick in the air. Barron tilted his head, watching the waiter closely. The man had no idea who he was speaking to. no idea that his arrogance was about to cost him everything. "I'd like to speak to the manager," Barron said evenly. The waiter laughed outright this time, wiping an imaginary tear from his eye. "The manager?" He clapped his hands mockingly. "Oh, this is rich. Let me guess, you're going to file a complaint? Demand a free meal?" More laughter from nearby tables. The restaurant had turned into a stage, and Barron was their entertainment. But Barron didn't waver. He stood tall, his face unreadable. "Go ahead," he said simply. "Call them." The waiter shook his head, still grinning, and turned toward the back. "This'll be good." A few moments later, the manager appeared. A stout man in an expensive navy suit. His expression immediately shifted the moment he laid eyes on Barron. His mouth opened slightly, his face paling as recognition dawned. This wasn't just some random man off the street. This was Barron Trump, the son of one of the most powerful men in the world. The waiter, oblivious, launched into an exaggerated retelling of the story, his arms waving as he described how this street rats had waltzed into their restaurant expecting a table. "He doesn't belong here," the waiter finished smugly. "I was just about to send him on his way." The manager's face had turned a sickly shade of white. His hands trembled slightly as he slowly turned to Barron. "I am so sorry, Mr. Trump," he stammered. I had no idea." The waiter blinked in confusion. "Wait, what?" The murmurs in the restaurant grew louder. The guests who had been laughing moments ago now looked deeply uncomfortable. The waiter turned back to Barron, his expression a mix of shock and fear. You're joking, right? You're not really." Barron pulled out his real wallet this time. The one he had tucked inside his hoodie, untouched until now. And when he opened it, a platinum card gleamed under the restaurant lights. Gasps rippled through the restaurant. The waiter's face drained of color. Barron met his stunned gaze, his voice calm but cutting. "You judged me without knowing who I was. You assumed I was worthless just because of how I looked." The waiter stumbled over his words, his earlier arrogance completely shattered. The manager's voice was cold, furious. "You turned away a Trump?" The waiter's mouth opened, but no words came out. He knew it was over. The manager straightened his jacket, his hands still trembling slightly. "Mr. Trump, please accept my sincerest apologies. This is not how we conduct business here." Barron's gaze didn't leave the waiter. "Really? Because from what I saw, it's exactly how your restaurant treats people who don't look the part." The room fell into an uneasy silence. The wealthy guests who had once laughed at him now shifted in their seats, avoiding his gaze. Barron let the silence stretch, letting the weight of their actions settle over them. Finally, he looked at the manager. "I don't think I'll be dining here. Ever." The manager visibly winced. Losing a customer like Barron Trump wasn't just about losing money. It was about reputation. Barron turned toward the waiter, who now looked completely broken. "You could have treated me with kindness," Barron said, his voice steady. "You could have given me the benefit of the doubt. But instead you mocked me. You humiliated me. And you assumed that because I looked poor, I wasn't worth your time." The waiter had no defense. His earlier smugness had completely vanished. Barron exhaled, shaking his head. "I hope you learned something from this." Then, without another word, he turned and walked out. The weight of Barron's words hung in the air long after he left. The restaurant that had moments ago been filled with laughter and condescension was now eerily silent. The guests who had smirked, chuckled, and whispered among themselves now sat rigid in their seats, their faces tight with unease. The manager turned slowly to the waiter, his face a mix of rage and panic. "Do you have any idea what you just did?" he hissed, his voice low but full of fury. The waiter still looked frozen, as if his mind was struggling to process what had just happened. I didn't know," he finally stammered, his once mocking tone replaced by sheer panic. "You didn't know?" the manager repeated, his voice rising. "That's your excuse? You just insulted and humiliated the son of one of the most powerful men in the world. Do you have any idea what that means for us?" The waiter swallowed hard, his hands trembling. I can apologize. Maybe he'll come back." The manager cut him off with a sharp laugh, not one of amusement, but of disbelief. "Oh, you think he's coming back?" The manager's voice dripped with venom. "You just turned away a billionaire's son. You embarrassed him. You made our restaurant a joke. Do you know what's going to happen next?" The waiter shook his head slowly, dread settling in his gut. The manager stepped closer, his voice dangerously low. "This is going to be all over the news. By tomorrow, every major outlet is going to be talking about how our restaurant treated Barron Trump like garbage just because of how he looked." The waiter felt his stomach drop. The media. He could already picture the headlines. "Elite restaurant humiliates Barron Trump, not knowing who he is. Billionaire's son denied service for looking poor. Le Maison Royale waiter mocks Trump heir. Instantly regrets it." The restaurant's reputation, the prestige it had built over the years, was about to be completely destroyed. And it was all because of him. "I didn't mean to," he started, but the manager wasn't done. "You think this ends with bad publicity?" The manager's face was turning red, his fury uncontrollable now. "This isn't just about one customer, you idiot. This is about our future. Our clientele. Do you think any of our regulars want to be associated with a place that treats people like dirt?" The wealthy guests who had been so entertained just moments ago were now nervously avoiding eye contact. Some were already getting up, leaving their tables, hoping to avoid the fallout. Then came the final blow. The manager took a deep breath, his hands balling into fists. "You're fired." The words hit like a slap. The waiter blinked in shock. "What? No, you can't." "Oh, I can," the manager snapped. "And I just did." "But." "No buts. You embarrassed this restaurant, and now we're going to pay the price. So pack your things and get out." "No." The waiter stood there, completely shattered. Just minutes ago, he had been laughing, mocking someone he thought was beneath him. Now he was jobless. And worse? It was only the beginning of his downfall. The aftermath. The story goes public. Barron sat in the back of a black SUV, watching the city lights blur past the tinted windows. His phone buzzed on the seat beside him, and when he picked it up, he saw a familiar name flash across the screen. Ivanka. He smirked slightly. Of course she had heard already. "Hey," he answered. "I can't believe you did that." Her voice came through, a mix of amusement and pride. "You actually went through with it?" Barron chuckled. "I had to see it for myself. And let's just say, it was even worse than I expected." There was a brief silence. "So, what now?" Barron exhaled, glancing at the city skyline. "Now, I don't even have to do anything. The internet will take care of it." And he was right. By the next morning, the story had exploded. Social media was flooded with videos, tweets, and articles. News stations were playing the clip of the encounter on repeat. The once prestigious restaurant was now a laughingstock. People who had never even heard of Le Maison Royale before were now boycotting it entirely. And the waiter? His name was now everywhere. Articles dug into his past, people tracked down old complaints from customers, and within hours, his social media accounts were deleted out of sheer panic. But it was too late. The damage was done. The unexpected twist. A few days later, Barron was scrolling through his phone when he saw something that made him pause. It was a statement from the restaurant. "We sincerely apologize to Mr. Trump for the way he was treated. Le Maison Royale does not condone discrimination based on appearance, and the actions of our former employee do not reflect our values. We have taken immediate steps to ensure that such an incident never happens again." Barron raised an eyebrow. They were trying to save face. He scrolled down and saw that the public wasn't buying it. Comments flooded the post. "You didn't apologize because you felt bad. You apologized because you got caught. So if this was just a random homeless man, you'd still have treated him like garbage, right? You only care about values when it's a billionaire's son." Barron smirked. People were seeing through the lies. That's when he saw another headline that made his eyebrows raise. "Former Le Maison Royale waiter struggles to find work after viral incident." Barron clicked the article, scanning through it. Apparently, the waiter had tried applying to other high-end restaurants, but no one wanted the PR nightmare that came with hiring him. He had gone from looking down on others to being looked down on himself. The irony wasn't lost on Barron. He leaned back, thinking about how quickly everything had changed. One mistake, one cruel moment, and it had cost that waiter everything. Barron had walked into that restaurant expecting to be mistreated. But even he hadn't expected to see such blatant cruelty firsthand. He hoped the waiter had learned something from it. Because next time, there might not be a lesson, only consequences. The fallout from the viral scandal only grew worse in the following weeks. What had started as an isolated incident in a single high-end restaurant had turned into a nationwide conversation about class discrimination, arrogance, and the consequences of judging people based on their appearance. Barron had moved on. He had made his point, taught a lesson without lifting a finger, and was content to let the world do the rest. But the world wasn't done with the story. The waiter's downfall. The former waiter, now unemployed and desperate, had underestimated just how much damage one moment of cruelty could cause. At first, he had tried to move on quietly. He applied for jobs at other high-end restaurants, convinced that his years of experience would get him a new position in no time. But everywhere he went, his name was already known. The moment managers saw his face, they whispered among themselves, glancing at their phones, recognizing him from the scandal. "Sorry, we're not hiring," they'd say. Even when they clearly were. Some were more blunt. "Isn't that the guy who kicked Barron Trump out of Le Maison Royale?" "Yeah, hard pass." Doors that were once wide open to him were now slammed shut. He tried lower-end restaurants, but they didn't want him either. "Your attitude doesn't fit our values," one owner said. "We actually treat customers with respect here." The irony burned. For the first time in his life, he felt what it was like to be turned away. To be judged without being given a chance. Just like he had done to Barron. The lawsuit that shocked everyone. As if things weren't bad enough, Le Maison Royale itself came under fire. Not just in the media, but legally. Lawyers lined up to take the case of discrimination, arguing that the restaurant had a long history of treating lower-class patrons with disdain. Former customers came forward, sharing their own horror stories. One woman revealed that she had been asked to leave because her purse wasn't a recognized luxury brand. A man told reporters that a waiter had ignored him for over an hour because he didn't order an expensive bottle of wine. The worst part? A hidden camera investigation caught another waiter turning away a man in plain clothes, claiming the restaurant was fully booked, while 5 minutes later, a wealthy-looking couple walked in and got a table immediately. It wasn't just one bad waiter. It was a pattern. Le Maison Royale tried to settle quietly, but the case blew up. Customers boycotted. The high-end clientele stopped coming. And within months, Le Maison Royale shut its doors for good. A once legendary restaurant, brought down by one fateful night of arrogance. The second chance, for the right person. As for Barron, he had no interest in the lawsuits or the drama. But one day, while scrolling through an article about the case, something caught his eye. A former employee of Le Maison Royale, one who had spoken up against the discrimination. She had been a young server, working there for just under a year. Unlike the other staff, she had quietly tried to help customers who were treated unfairly. But when she spoke up about what happened to Barron, she was fired. Her name was Anna. Barron leaned back in his chair, reading about how she had struggled to find another job, just like the cruel waiter. But the difference? She had lost her job for doing the right thing. And Barron had zero tolerance for injustice. The call that changed everything. Anna was sitting at a small cafe, nervously sipping on a cup of coffee. She had spent months applying for jobs, but no one wanted to hire a former employee of a failing restaurant embroiled in lawsuits. She had been punished for doing the right thing. And just as she was about to give up hope, her phone rang. She almost ignored it, assuming it was another rejection. But when she saw the name on the screen, her heart stopped. Barron Trump. Her hands trembled as she answered. Hello. Anna, came the familiar voice. This is Barron Trump. I wanted to talk to you. She sat up so fast her coffee almost spilled. Mr. Trump, You don't have to say anything, Barron said smoothly. I heard about what happened. How you stood up for what was right. And I respect that. Anna's throat tightened. I didn't expect anyone to care. I do, Barron replied. And I want to offer you something. Anna's breath hitched. Offer me what? A job, Barron said simply. At a restaurant that actually values integrity. Silence. Anna's mind raced. She had gone from being fired and hopeless to receiving an offer from one of the most influential names in the country. Tears stung her eyes. I don't know what to say. Say yes, Barron said with a smile in his voice. And she did. Poetic justice, the waiter's final fall. As for the waiter who had mocked Barron, his downward spiral continued. Desperate, he applied for low-paying jobs just to keep himself afloat. But people recognized him. You're the guy who insulted Barron Trump, aren't you? I saw you on the news. No thanks. No restaurant, no cafe, not even a fast food place would take him. One day, he walked into a restaurant in a different city, hoping to start over. And as he approached the hiring desk, his stomach turned to ice. The manager standing behind the desk? Anna. His former coworker. The one he had laughed at. The one he had watched get fired for standing up for what was right. And now? She was the one holding the power. The moment their eyes met, he saw it. Recognition. But no kindness. No second chance. Anna slowly shook her head. We don't tolerate arrogance here, she said coolly. And with that, she turned away, leaving him standing there, just like he had once left Barron. His own actions had come back to haunt him. And this time, there was no way out. The sun was setting over the city as Barron Trump sat at his favorite rooftop lounge, sipping a glass of water while overlooking the skyline. His phone buzzed on the table beside him, the screen lighting up with a notification. The headline made him smirk. Le Maison Royale closes its doors for good. Arrogance destroys a once legendary restaurant. He had expected as much. The scandal had been too big, the backlash too severe. No amount of apologies, PR spins, or desperate attempts at damage control could undo the damage that one arrogant waiter had inflicted upon the entire establishment. It was a lesson in consequences. A lesson that the former waiter had learned the hard way. Barron wasn't one to dwell on the misfortune of others, but there was something poetic about how quickly the tables had turned. He thought back to that night at the restaurant, how the waiter had sneered at him, mocked him, dismissed him. The way the guests had laughed along, never once questioning the cruelty they were witnessing. And now, the restaurant was gone. The waiter had lost everything. And Anna, the only person who had done the right thing, had gained everything. That was justice. That was the way the world should work. His phone buzzed again. A message from Anna. Anna, I still can't believe this is my life now. Thank you for giving me a chance, Barron. He smiled, typing back. Barron, you earned it. She had. Anna's new beginning. Anna stood behind the polished counter of her new restaurant, a bright smile on her face as she greeted customers. This, her restaurant. After Barron had helped her secure a job at one of the finest restaurants in the city, she had worked harder than ever, proving herself time and time again. Within months, she had been promoted to manager. And then, one day, Barron had walked in with a proposal. What if you ran your own place? He had asked, leaning casually against the bar, a knowing smirk on his face. She had laughed at first. Yeah, sure. Let me just check my multi-million-dollar savings account. But Barron had been serious. He had seen something in her. A natural leader. Someone who understood the business, who knew how to treat people, who had integrity. So he had done what no one else had ever done for her. He had invested in her. And now, 6 months later, she was standing in her own restaurant, greeting customers with the warmth and kindness she had once been denied. A young couple walked up to the counter, scanning the menu. We heard about this place on the news, the woman said excitedly. Everyone's been talking about how you treat customers like family. Anna's smile widened. That was the reputation she wanted. That's exactly how we do things here, she said warmly. Welcome to Anna's table. The couple placed their order, and as Anna turned to the kitchen, she paused, running her fingers along the smooth wooden counter. She thought about where she had been just a year ago. Fired, humiliated, wondering how she was going to survive. And now? Now she was exactly where she was meant to be. The waiter's final fate. Meanwhile, the former waiter who had once ruled over Le Maison Royale with smug arrogance had now fallen to rock bottom. He had burned every bridge. No high-end restaurant would hire him. His name was too toxic. No lower-end establishment wanted him either. His attitude had been exposed to the world. With nowhere else to turn, he took the only job he could find: a local fast food chain. He stood behind the register in a wrinkled uniform, his once perfect hair now hidden beneath a visor, his polished shoes replaced with non-slip sneakers. The same type of people he had once sneered at now worked beside him. And worst of all, he was now on the receiving end of the same condescension he had once dished out.